I have been talking for the past half hour with David Mamet, one of, if not the equal of any of America's great playwrights, about his brand new and wonderful, delightful new book, The Disenlightenment. It will be condemned. It may be banned, but it's a hell of a read. And David is still with me, and I'm very grateful for that. David, you mentioned repeatedly through The Disenlightenment that your racket is the stage, the theater, 70 episodes of television, writing generally. And that's great. But you threaten my racket because you say on page 137, anyone encouraged to talk at great length will eventually reveal himself as inconsistent, foolish, or mistaken. This is the operation of both the celebrity interview and a criminal interrogation. If too many people read that, I'm not going to get many guests.
No, you're doing great. And P.S., I look at all the people on Fox, they're an extraordinary array of talent, and their knowledge and concision and self-control is it's certainly beyond me. I have nothing but admiration for them. And you.
Britt Hume set the standard. Brett Baer keeps it every day. And you're right. I like working with these people because they're all professional in doing the news. Let me talk about three subjects in our last 10 minutes. A is education. You observed on page 66 of The Disenlightenment, to have failed to prepare for the test is the bad dream of the Western child. The horrifying test historically was factual or practical, regurgitate the capital of Prussia, or deal with the 2 trains leaving Chicago. Today's school child is taxed, it seems, neither recall nor to reason, but to assent. You're right, but you're also an optimist that we can change that. Why are you an optimist we can change that?
Well, because I've been very involved with education all my life. In my young life as a failure and as a ne'er-do-well, and later as a fellow who founded a couple of theaters and acting schools. And it all comes down to, the education is pretty simple. What are you actually teaching? When do you know when you've learned it? And can you do it? What are the signposts along the way? Kids go to college for 8 years to take French, and they can't order a cup of coffee. I mean, so what we've done is institutionalize that through the teachers union and the elite universities, where kids are told that actual learning, that's to say actual marketable ability, is beside the point, and what they're supposed to do is in effect protest or fight to stand around and scream, because they've been asked to do, they haven't, the reason that they're screaming is they haven't been asked to do anything. So that makes children very, very, very nervous. If a child doesn't know the rules, the child is either going to become morose and ingrown, or they're going to become the bad seed and say, well, hell, if nobody else in charge, I guess I better be. That's a dysfunctional family, and that's a dysfunctional educational system. That's a dysfunctional country. So the answer is to get government out of education. How much time does a kid actually need to sit in a classroom listening to some idiot read from a book and call it school? The great thing about the internet
by the way, you provide the greatest concise example of how to teach with your flea market and $5 example. People have to read Disenlightenment to learn how to be a creative writer. But that's genius, David, and people are going to have to read it. But I want to go to B, Trump. You write a lot about Trump in the book. You write about lawfare from pages 111 to 114. Were you aware at the time of what a charade Juan Merchan was running, what a joke Alvin Bragg was, what a carnival it all became? Were you aware of it at the start?
Of course I was, and it's much, much worse than that. It was a coup, and it was a coup that succeeded. And they tried everything, including, arguably, putting him on the spot and letting him get shot. This guy was treated worse, certainly treated as badly as Dred Scott or the Japanese under the Korematsu decision. He was treated as an enemy that must be destroyed, and we're seeing it still today. By dehumanizing Trump, he's got to be Hitler. Dehumanizing the Jew, by dehumanizing people, which is the trick of the Marxist. They aren't human beings, therefore we can do whatever we want to them.
Yeah, David, I've interviewed him 30 times, and he has a unique way of talking. Have you figured out how he talks yet? Do you listen? Do you know him? I should preface that. Have you actually sat down and spoken with him?
I haven't sat down and spoken with, but I talked to him on the phone a couple of times when he was still in the movie business, and he called me up. The entertainment. He called me up the day after I did Bill Maher the last time. He was on Bill Maher the last time, and Bill leads off and says, "I know you're conservative and blah blah blah, but do you actually believe that the election was stolen?" So I waffled a little bit. I said, "Well, I don't know. I can't remember what I said, but it wasn't very courageous on my part." Next morning, the phone rings. Person says, "Are you available for the president?" And I'm thinking, why would Biden call me? And it's Donald Trump. He says, "David," he said, "I saw you on Bill Maher. I thought you were great, but you know that election was stolen. You know it
Ha!
was." I said, "Mr. President, you know what? You're right." He says, "Yeah, and let me tell you why." And so he talked for like 10 minutes, walking me through the thing, and he was absolutely right. I wussied out on that on the subject. But I was flattered, very flattered that he called me.
But you listen to people and then you put it back up on stage. I was listening last night after I finished the Disenlightenment to Speed the Plow, the Jeffrey Goldblum Goldberg version, which is on Apple iBooks. I was just listening to Dougie Wood, and I was thinking, you listen to how people talk. I don't know if you could replicate how Trump talks. Do you think you could?
No, I don't think I could. Oh, listen. Speaking of listen, I just did a new movie with Shia
Oh,
LaBeouf, and I think you're going to like it. It's called Henry Johnson, and it's available. Uh, I, I don't know. It's wherever the hell is Instagram. It's called HenryJohnsonMovie.com, and I know you liked The Anarchist very much, and that's being said.
very
I think you'll
much.
like Henry
Oh, I
Johnson.
will watch Henry Johnson then. I'll find the platform. Last couple of
Uh,
minutes on the essay most disturbing. What shall we give the sun god? Our generation, your and mine, was the first to grow up with the threat of instant annihilation. Our children and grandchildren are the first to grow up with instant global communication, which that combination produces fear and fury. Where's it going?
Well, who knows? I mean, as our friends the Muslims say, it was all written in the mind of Allah long ago, and that's true. But it's going where it's going. But Rebecca West said something interesting. She said all great social upheavals are caused by a change in climate, and I think there's a great deal of wisdom in that. But not because of quote climate change, which is a complete fiction, but because the changes in agriculture, blah blah, and the shift in population. But what I see is that the hugest changes in civilization have been caused by technology. The first was the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, and the next, which is just as destructive, is the computer revolution in the last 40 years, which has it's changed everything. So everything that was based on methods of production, methods of communication, methods of employment, therefore methods of education, has just gone out the window, and people are freaking terrified. And some of them are not terrified and say, okay, let's figure it out. They're called conservatives. And some of them are running around like the sky is falling, and they're saying, who is to blame? Who is to blame? Oh, it obviously is the Jews, and it's Trump, and it's the sexism, and blah, 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 blah. But the fact is that things have vastly changed. And so what the left is looking at is like they live on the Erie Canal, and
Huh.
railroads have come in.
Yeah, I saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning last night. You called Maverick Top Gun the death rattle of the movies in the Disenlightenment. All that Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is the Cuban Missile Crisis with better stunts, and I think that's true. It's the Cuban Missile Crisis. Do you think the Cuban Missile Crisis would have turned out the same had the internet been around? Because I don't. I think the missiles would have launched because of the pressure from X.
I really don't know. It's like saying, hey, what would Spartacus have done if he had a Piper Cub, you know?
David Mamet, you have spent 45 minutes with me. Thank you so much for doing that. The Disenlightenment is a joy. What's the Henry Johnson the dot
Yeah,
com?
Henry Johnson
HenryJohnson.com.
movie. No, Henry
Henry
Johnson
Johnson
movie dot
movie.
com.
I will go and
Dot
watch that.
com.
Thank you for spending time, and thank you for agreeing to talk to Ben Dominich. He's thrilled. He's coming by to get the book from me tomorrow to read it, but mine is so marked up, I don't know if he'll be able to make any sense out of it. Thank you for your time, David. I hope I see you on the West Coast soon, and I'll tell you what I think about Henry Johnson, the movie, after I've watched it. Be well.
It's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you, Hugh.
That, my friends, stick around. I'm going to use parts 1 and 2 of the interview to open hours 2 and 3 of the show today. So all of the David Mamet interview will appear, but we will put it in its original order on YouTube as well if you miss any of it. Don't go anywhere. Lots of show today, including the CEO of the Bank of America. So quite a show when you go from David Mamet to Brian Moynihan in one day. Don't miss a minute of it right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. From David Mamet to Danny Pletka, fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, Danny. It was great seeing you at the John Ondrazik concert last week and meeting your husband. But I got to say, whenever you see someone in D.C. out of context, it's really startling. And if someone had attacked the Ondrazik show, they would have got half of the public intellectuals of Washington, D.C., and a bunch of the journalists, too. So I'm glad they didn't do that. Danny, I want to talk to you about Iran. President Trump today said he's getting very close to a solution with Iran and that it would be very inappropriate if Netanyahu struck Iran during these talks. Your reaction?
So I feel like you and I talk about this not infrequently and come at it from slightly different perspectives. I have less trust in the president on this than I want to. Look, you and I have probably both known Benjamin Netanyahu for roughly the same amount of time, which is, in my case, about 4 decades. And they've always threatened, they've always said they were going to do it, and they have not done it. They haven't taken care of Iran's nuclear weapons program. I guess that Trump has some intelligence that suggests that the Israelis are really serious this time. That should be a pressure point with him, not an opportunity to release the pressure from Israel on Iran by taking Iran's side. I think that's problematic.
Do you think he might be increasing the pressure? I'm trying to be best case scenario here. Trump is using the opportunity that presents itself to Netanyahu for the first time in these 40 years to actually strike Iran effectively, because they've already struck Iran twice, once very comprehensively. Do you think the president might be using this as the leverage you discussed, Danny, with the Ayatollah, who publicly, by the way, doesn't say anything remotely like Donald Trump says?
No, you're exactly right. In fact, they've said that they will not accept the US red line, which is no uranium enrichment. And so I'm not entirely sure what the discussions are about right now. Do I think Donald Trump is playing 4-dimensional chess? Look, this is a great Washington conversation. Is Donald Trump playing 4-dimensional chess, or is he being used as a patsy by the Khamenei regime? I don't know the answer to that. And I have not been made more confident by the statements of the president's team, neither by Witkoff nor by others. I'm really nervous.
Let me ask you if you think Netanyahu will pass by a rapidly closing window of vulnerability to hit the nuclear sites. It would not be all-out war. It would be repeated strikes on portions of the missile and nuclear program. And I have no doubt in my mind that the IDF can do it. They might lose some planes, but they can do it. They might lose some pilots, but they can do it. Do you think they should?
I have long argued that they should. The Israelis, I once made a map of the number of times that the Israelis, not the Americans, the Israelis said that the Iranians were going into, what did Ehud Barak call it? The zone of immunity, he said. This is probably 20 years ago. There were times when they could have done it. I still think they should do it. The Iranians don't have the means to retaliate. Their air defenses are still out of commission for the most part. They've lost Hamas, they've lost Hezbollah, the Houthis are damaged, the popular mobilization forces inside Iraq are not really active enough to support them. I don't even think they'd be able to retaliate. So I think that they ought to do it get it done while the getting's good. What do you
And the
think?
Syrians are out of the game. So let me
Yeah.
then go over to Hamas, because your podcast with Mark Thiessen is called "What the Hell is Going On." I want to ask you that question. What the hell is going on in Gaza? I saw the leaked plan to take 75% of Gaza and occupy it and methodically destroy the tunnels while trying to rescue the hostages. Then I saw it get walked back yesterday. What the hell is going on, Danny Pletka?
Oh, if only I knew, Hugh Hewitt. If only I knew. Like, the Israelis have rightly observed that all-out war did not release all of the hostages. That very much like the insurgent terrorist group that it is, when the Israelis pull out, Hamas backfills. When the Israelis get out of a tunnel, Hamas gets back in. We saw this in Iraq. That's what the surge was all about. And the prime tenets of counterinsurgency strategy, which is what is necessary, is not just clear what the Israelis have been doing, it's hold. And in the case of Iraq, it was build. I think the Israeli proposition is to clear and hold until they have the hostages out and they are sure that Hamas cannot reconstitute. That's a very tall order, Hugh, and I think it'll be
Last,
very hard to
que-
execute.
last question in parallel, Danny. The surge was accompanied by the Sunni awakening when the tribes came onto the American side. There are indications that the Gazans have had it with Hamas. Do you believe that that is deep and wide, or is that very shallow?
This is what breaks my heart about the conflict is people who keep telling us, that they care about Palestine and they care about Palestinians. They don't. I actually have worked on this for a very long time, longer than I care to admit. And if you care about quote unquote Palestine, if you care about the Palestinian people, then what you want is that kind of awakening. I think it's very shallow. I think that the problem for the Palestinians is that over the last 35 years, the Europeans, and everybody else who has piously been protesting about the importance of building Palestine has done nothing to build institutions, to build politics, to build the kind of stable government that would actually be allowed to govern. So we've got the PLO, Fatah, and we've got Hamas. No one else is able to organize. And until that changes, there's not going to be a real Palestine.
Danny Pletka, as always, realistic and sober. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, Danny. From AEI and the podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Time for me to take my relief factor, and I need to because it's been one of those weeks. Up early downtown this morning and then back and forth. And I'll tell you what, relief factor keeps me in the game. Every single day, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I take it. Not because they're a sponsor, but because it works. They happen to be a sponsor, but it works. I have long told you I don't take a supplement. I've been offered many deals to do many supplements. It's the only one I've taken for 20 years. It's the only one I am going to take because I don't need anything else. I've been blessed by relatively good health for a long time, and I credit Relief Factor with keeping me in the game. Try it for 3 weeks. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1995, or head to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, find the starter pack, 1995, order it, and get going. Let me also ask you, please consider a donation to Angel Tree. It's our annual campaign on behalf of the children whose mom and dad are in jail. They'd like to go to camp too. Listen to this volunteer.
Sometimes they need that love, not just their parents, but a community that knows what they're going through and has experienced it and say like, hey, you're going through this now, but things can get better. Be positive. Hopefully this is something that they will keep and treasure forever. Like I said, a core memory to help them want to do better, not end up in their parents' footsteps and realize that that was their dad's mistake and not theirs, but they can do better and succeed and have a great life.
888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. $200 to send a kid to camp this summer. Or go find the banner at the top of hughhewitt.com. It takes a second to load, but you can't miss it. You're always generous. Thank you in advance because you send a lot of kids to camp, thousands of kids to camp every year. And I am deeply appreciative, as are their parents, including the one who's incarcerated. Their child gets camp. Joined now by the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. Brian, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. You are a Catholic kid from Ohio, so we may have a couple of things in common. But you're from Marietta, so I guess you're probably a Bengals and a Reds fan, unless you've sold out to Boston teams. What is it?
Well, two things to that. One, I was a Reds fan for sure, and I was probably a Bengals fan more than a Browns fan. But unfortunately, having lived in New England and my family all growing up there, and the success of the teams has led me to be a Patriots fan and a Red Sox fan, and etc. But
Well,
they're
that's a
fun. It was a fun place to
bad
grow up.
start. That's a
Oh,
terrible start.
I would.
But
Well,
I
you're
do
from
know. I
Warren,
got to say
Ohio. I
one thing.
understand. So,
Yeah, Buckeyes have got a lot in common. I got to always declare before an interview, my son's sister-in-law works for you, but you don't know that, and I'm not going to tell you her name, so there's no conflict. And I think you probably
okay.
worked with Regina Pisa back in your Fleet days, and she's a very dear friend. And so we're not going to talk about Fleet days. But I do want to begin by asking you how Brown managed to escape the terrible troubles that have. You are the Chancellor of Brown now, and we're going to talk mostly economics and the Bank of America. But how has Brown managed to escape the troubles of my alma mater, Harvard, and your alma mater, Notre Dame, and Brown? How did that happen?
Well, at the end of the day, every business organization has to have great leadership. So I'm the chair of the board, but our president, Chris Paxson, who just frankly agreed to stay on for a couple extra years, which is terrific and a great thing for Brown. We just released yesterday, has done a great job of managing through this. And I think her credibility with the students and the faculty and her discipline has allowed Brown to fare well. And when people have done things that were counter to the values of the institution, I took them to task, and so she's just done a great job managing through it. And I think, look, at the end of the day, what these universities do is one that is unbelievable, making individuals like you and me better, coming from both of us from Ohio, from relatively small towns into that atmosphere, be able to do what we're doing, the research they do. And we got to get this sorted out because these institutions need to be successful for America to be successful. They add to America's success.
I think the ones that I'm from has to get back on the track, but the one you're from never got off of it. So I'm glad of that, and congratulations to your board and your leader. Let me ask you about Bank of America, and the hardest question first. President Trump accused Bank of America of debanking conservatives. Did that actually happen?
No, we don't know. We have 70 million consumers. Last year, we opened 11 million new accounts for our customers and new customers. We have 12 million small business customers. We lend about 4 or 5 million of them. We have tens of thousands of middle market companies. And, we reflect the economies across America's largest consumer and commercial bank inside the U.S. And so we bank everybody. Now, what the president was raising, if you listen to his comments, it was about the amount of regulation that's gone on in our industry, and it needs to be fixed. There are regulations which cause accounts to be closed because of what they call BSA, AML, Bank Secrecy Act, AML rules and regulations. There's regulators examining on reputational risk and things. That stuff we can push back in the middle, and it had gotten out of hand. And we were clear about that. We just couldn't get anybody to listen to us, and new administrations listening to us.
Oh, well, that's good. Now, is there deregulation coming to the financial sector? Because everything else is overregulated. Everything I've ever worked in is overregulated, primarily land use when I was lawyering. Is banking still overregulated?
Well, I think in the end of the day, the companies, after the financial crisis, there was an amount of regulation that came to bear. Stress testing, new higher capital requirements, or always more capital requirements, liquidity requirements, scope of activity requirements, and all those all came through, and they righted the wrongs. And we've been doing stress tests every year to prove that the capital liquidity were examined. The problem is the crisis ended. The U.S. recovered like no one else in the world. The banking system recovered. Then you had the next crisis, which is the pandemic. The banking system is solid and performs well and helps America get through it, and helped President Trump in the early days of that. You make sure consumers got fair deals and small business lending kept going, et cetera. Then you had the regional bank crisis where people had made mistakes and those companies were liquidated and the big banks stepped in to help. Yet all during that time, with the objective evidence that we were well regulated, had lots of capital, even the regulators saying for a decade or more, we have enough capital, kept promulgating rules to regulate us more. And the materiality standard was long and the objectivity. So we are looking forward to getting it back in the middle. We don't want no regulation. That would be problematic for financial services companies because at the end of the day, we have the trust of people with their deposits, and we make loans and we help people build their financial lives. But it gotten too far swung, and we're bringing it, and hopefully it'll come back. But at the end of the day, we have the best banking system in the world, the best banking companies in the world. It is a great industry for us. If we regulate it too much, we will look like some other places which aren't very good, aren't as good. and that's what we got to avoid.
I'll pause it right there. I'll be right back. I'm going to play out my conversation with Brian Moynihan, as I do with David Mamet today, over 3 hours. So do not miss any of today's program. Mary Catherine Ham is my guest. She is host of Getting Hammered, the podcast that she co-hosts with Vic Mattis, and Normally, which is another podcast which I haven't listened to, but I'm sure it's as good as Getting Hammered. Mary Catherine, good to see you. I'm going to play a new game with you today. Are you ready for a new game?
Okay. Sure.
It's called React to the President. Donald Trump was in the Oval today, and let's go with cut number 2 first.
Do you believe the Russians are being disrespectful when they say that your criticisms of Putin are simply an emotional response? And do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently, but it'll take about a week and a half.
Mary Catherine, what do you think?
I mean, I'm glad to hear, I think, a more realistic assessment of Putin from the president. I feel like I have an answer for whether he's tapping us along. I would like the answer to be what Trump wished it was from the beginning, but I'm not sure it will be. Yeah. I also think that sometimes the way that reporters ask these questions are so based on everyone's like emotions and attempting to drive this personal conflict as opposed to the actual foreign policy.
All right, cut number 3, Donald Trump.
I want to make sure that the foreign students are people that can love our country. We don't want to see shopping centers exploding. We don't want to see the kind of riots that you had. And I'll tell you what, many of those students didn't go anywhere. Many of those students were troublemakers caused by the radical left lunatics in this country.
What do you think, Mary Catherine Ham?
I mean, I do think that when we are allowing people into the country to take advantage of a, well, the Ivies have fallen in my estimation, but a leading educational system, that we should be able to choose who those people are, that we have significant leeway in doing so. I agree with the president that we would like them to be people who don't hate our country and do not wish to do violence here. Now, that description doesn't extend to every foreign student who disagrees with American policy, of course, but there are not small numbers that are here to undermine the United States of America, sometimes under the direction and obligation to a power that is against us. So we should deal with that.
All right, cut number 5. The president moves on to Netanyahu and Iran.
Did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him?
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now. Because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust. I don't trust anybody. So no trust. I want it very strong where we can go in with inspectors. We can take whatever we want. We can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? 2 ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment. Could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
Mary Catherine Ham.
I also have no trust and would prefer that he has even less than none. I much preferred the Trump administration one's take on Iran. I fear that we are headed into making a similar deal to JCPOA. I don't love that he's talking in public about warnings he has given Netanyahu. And I feel like the Iranians, we have a short period of time during which their arms are sort of naked before the world. And taking advantage of that is more important than making some nonsense deal with them. I don't trust the inspectors. I don't trust Iran. I think it would go badly.
All right, cut number 7, Gaza time with Donald Trump in the Oval.
No, we're dealing with the whole situation in Gaza. We're getting food to the people of Gaza. It's been a very nasty situation, very nasty fight. October 7th was a very nasty day, the worst that I think I've ever seen. It was a horrible day, and people aren't going to forget that either. So we'll see how that all works out.
Mary Catherine?
I mean, that one was sort of non-committal. I didn't hear anything about a new resort this time around. I like the idea that he references that we're getting people food in Gaza because that's happening courtesy of the Israeli and American government collaborating to make sure that food doesn't go to Hamas, which is where it usually goes. I'm encouraged a little bit by some of the protests we've seen against Hamas by Palestinians in Gaza. And I hope to the extent we can support that.
All right, a couple more. Cut number 8, which I'll cut off in mid-quote. Go ahead, cut number 8.
Term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did.
So then the reporter comes back, Mary Catherine, with cut number 9.
I have great respect for the people at the European Union. They wouldn't be over here today negotiating if I didn't put a 50% tariff on. The sad thing is now when I make a deal with them, it's something much more reasonable. They'll say, oh, he was chicken. He was chicken. That's so unbelievable.
Mary Catherine, what do you think?
I mean, look, he does back off sometimes because he doesn't want the market to tank, and I appreciate that. Now, I do think he's sort of like there's some internal contradictions here where he wants tariffs to be high to bring in a bunch of revenue, but also he's going to back off of the high tariffs so that he can get people to the table to negotiate lower tariffs. Look, I think the whole thing is sort of unpredictable and not great for businesses making plans in the future. I think there are things where you can make better deals for America, and I hope that he does so, and I continue to hope that he does so. But the unpredictability of it, which I know is sort of Trump's thing, he loves tariffs and he loves negotiating. So either way it goes for him, it's great. It's not always great for the market or for regular people.
And it's not great for journalists to say, hey, you chickened out. That's bad journalism, by the way. That's my opinion, not Mary Catherine Ham. You can get hers. You can get hers over at Getting Hammered. Go and sign up, like and subscribe, Getting Hammered, wherever podcasts are available. We have great sponsors here, especially those inside the Beltway trying to change things. TaxCutsNow.com is sponsored by the Job Creators Network, which is a sponsor of my show. Tax Cuts Now, I wrote a long piece today that will be in Fox News tomorrow about how the One Big Beautiful Bill was named the One Big Beautiful Bill on this program on January 5 by President Trump. And now the Senate has H.R. 1, One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And the One Big Beautiful Bill Act extends the Trump tax cuts of 2017, makes them better, deeper, wider, stronger, more growth-oriented. So we want that to get through the Senate. Shelley Moore Capito on Ruthless Podcast yesterday noted, Senate's going to put its fingerprints on it. That's fine. Everybody knows that. They're a co-equal branch of the Congress, and they're part of the separation of powers. So they're going to work on it, and there are ways it can be improved. But the key thing is for you, the citizens, to go to taxcutsnow.com and send your senators a message that you want it to pass, however they tweak it. You want it to get to conference. You know they care about rural hospitals in some states. In other states, they care about salt. In other states, they don't care about salt. All you want is to make the tax cuts permanent so we can have a growth economy. Bay of A President Brian Moynihan talked about this in my interview with him earlier today, which I'll play in hour 2. TaxCutsNow.com. We cannot allow the tax code to revert to what it was prior to 2017 when companies simply would not allocate capital to America. TaxCutsNow.com. My other friends are the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. ALEC.org/Hugh, if you want to sign up for their weekly newsletter on the state of the states. But they are meeting in Indianapolis in July of this year. I hope that's the home of the reigning NBA champion Pacers. I'm rooting for the Pacers because the Pacers beat the Cavaliers. So if the Pacers win, that means Cavaliers might be second best and uninjured best team in the NBA. At least that's what I'll tell myself. But the 52nd ALEC meeting is in Indianapolis, July 16 to 18, and they're launching their second task force of the year. I want to get the name right. It's the Process and Procedures Task Force. Did you know 70% of Americans want elections cleaner, more transparent, and quicker? And a number of states have passed things, including the Only Citizens Vote Act, the School Board Election Date Act, the Safeguard American Votes Act, the Election Act. ALEC members, and it's the largest nonpartisan group of state legislators in the country, ALEC members gather together, they draft model legislation on process and procedures, and they send it out to all the states, and the smart states adopt it, or they tinker with it, depending on state constitutions and things like that. One size does not fit all, because we have a federal system, but ALEC fits the needs of every state legislator. So if you're a state legislator, you ought to join ALEC. If you're not a state legislator and you care about what's going on in the states, go sign up for alec.org/Hugh. That's alec.org/Hugh. Continuing to talk with David Mamet, whose brand new book, The Disenlightenment, is a fabulous read, as I've said, but if you don't get it early, you might find it's banned in some places. David, it's good to talk to you again. I want to begin by asking you, how in the world did you learn about the rule against perpetuities?
That's very interesting. My dad was a one-horse lawyer, and I would always go to his office, and I would do filing for him. He had this thing called Commerce Clearinghouse reports. I would do the filing of all these reports. He was a labor lawyer, and I really loved reading them. I really loved reading about law. I found it fascinating. And then I read a whole lot of Victorian literature. And a lot of the late Victorian literature, Wilkie Collins, not so much, to a certain extent, Dickens, Wilkie Collins and Mary Elizabeth Braddon, and especially Anthony Trollope, has to do with legal cases. And so there were all of these obscure terms that I love reading dictionaries. So I would write them down and look into them.
Oh, well, it was a horrific experience for me because that's first-year property law, and that took me right back to 1981. And I thought, my God, how does David Mamet know about the rule against perpetuity, which is always tested and never used? Let me begin by talking with you about your hometown on page 62. Delightful book, but it is going to be banned. So let's talk about the part that won't be banned. D. Them Does. This is a book of essays, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you open up, my small South Side Chicago neighborhood gave us Larry Ellison of Oracle, Seymour Hersh of the New York Times, Sherry Lansing, who ran Paramount Pictures just over the color line, Shelby Steele, and Malcolm X, and the blues, and skyscrapers, and improv, and great literature. But you're going to have to add now, David Mamet, in addition to, and Pope Leo XIV from Bronzeville, a suburb of Dolton, St. Mary of the Assumption. Is that near where you grew up?
No, it's not. But my stepmother's lived for years across the street on Astor Street from the Cardinals office. So I said, dude, your next door neighbor just got elected Pope. But apparently he never actually lived in that Cardinals office.
Okay. I just thought it was great that we have a Chicagoan as Pope. I know we are not co-religionists, but I thought it was great. My only disagreement with you in this book comes on page 235, where you say, I caught the wave at the top, meaning American culture, the year you were born. I'm a couple of years older than you. I think the best year to have been born in is in 1956, because Vietnam was not an issue for me, and my colleges were not riot scenes when I got to campus there in 1974. Do you think I caught the wave, or did you catch the top of the wave?
Well, those of us who think that we were lucky enough to be born into the time we were born into are that lucky. If we think we are, certainly we are.
Yeah, I found it. You're grateful, by turns grateful and alarmed in this collection of essays. And now where I turn, I'm not shining you on. I spent a year with Montaigne's essays as a senior in college, and it finally hit me. This is a series of essays, and I don't know if you ordered them with particular care, as Montaigne did, or if you did them in order of dashing them off. Which is it, David Mamet?
No, it's certainly the first. I mean, in addition to doing a lot of rewriting on all of these essays, with great help from my assistant and colleague editor Pam Suzamel, the next step is to put them in order, because it's Francois Truffaut said a movie should have a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. But he was absolutely wrong, because the audience is going to perceive it as a beginning, middle, and end, even if you don't. So you might as well get the wind at your back and use the way that they perceive to help them and to help you.
Well, what I enjoyed about it so much was moving in and out of your experience as a director and a writer, and then your political observations, and quite a lot about Jews in America and Jews around the world. So, to use your own language, you're the protagonist in this book, and I'm trying to work through, as the reader, the through line, as you call it, as to what you are doing. Are you an artist honoring Donald Trump? Are you an American Jew trying to jolt some of your tribe out of the trance they're in American politics? A word dancer showing off? Is it your reaction to the election incomprehension, you say, working through that incomprehension? Or is it all of the above, David Mamet?
Well, we have two great American philosophers, the two greatest philosophers of the 20th century. One was, of course, Daffy Duck, who famously encapsulated, Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," and Daffy Duck said, "Faye, what's going on here anyway?" So that's the question of philosophy. And the other great philosopher, of course, was Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, who wrote a book called "And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street," which I grew up with. It was one of his first successes. And this guy's going down along the street, and then he sees a cart, and then the cart has got a donkey, and the donkey's got a midget on it, and the midget's got a hat with a thing on it, and it keeps getting more and more and more. So this book is a compilation of and an homage to those two great philosophers. What's going on here? And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street being the American century.
But it is jagged, David. There are parts that are very optimistic, and then there are parts which are just completely pessimistic. I want to do the optimistic first. In your essay about the movie Gandhi, you kind of intimate that as the Indians, with Gandhi's leadership, told the British Raj, it's time for you to leave, is the American electorate telling the left and the Islamists it's time for them to leave? Do you think we've reached that point, a tipping point, in which we just collectively say, as we did in 2024, thank you for your services, they're no longer needed, and they will be exited off of the political stage?
Well, yes, the one certainly that the American people have said resoundingly, that's enough now. Thanks a lot. Or as we used to say in show business, I love you, honey, but the season's over. So there's that. But are they going to shuffle off the stage? No, of course, whoever does. And as Victor Davis Hanson said immediately after the election, yes, they were beaten. They're going to have to be beaten a few more times before they realize that if enough people tell you you're dead, lay down and die.
Do you think the trans issue is the issue on which the hill on which they will repeatedly choose to die, which isn't an 80-20 issue? It's not a 90-10 issue. I don't even think it's a 95-5 issue, though. The volume set makes the 5 sound a lot louder than 5. Do you think that's the issue that will break it?
No, I think it's the economy. I think the rest of it are just impossible. Here's what's happening is the left, of course, has chased its tail into making demands which are not only onerous, but absurd and blasphemous. And it's no wonder that they don't like religion, because what they've done is they created a new religion, having all the forms of the old religions, the Judeo-Christian religion, but worshiping Satan rather than God, if I may.
I think you're right. By the way, former Attorney General Bill Barr argued at length in his memoir, One Damn Thing After Another, that the secular left has become a religion, and its indoctrination ought to be banned in every public school in the same way that the indoctrination of Roman Catholicism is. Okay, things I learned in the book. The Breen office administered the Motion Picture Code from 1934 to 1968. Married couples had to be in twin beds. The shift to good, clean fun produced 30 years of drivel. That's in a footnote on page 153. Did it really last until 1960? I don't remember it lasting until 1968.
Well, I don't know which of their particular strictures lasted the longest, but was in power. And if you look at pre-code films before the Motion Picture Code 1934, most films are garbage, right? Because if you turn out a bunch of nothing but sausages, it's going to be very hard to get a magnificent sausage. Maybe a small chef's going to come up and sneak in and take out the pesticides and put in some actual beef. But most films are garbage. But the particular flavor of garbage that the pre-code films were not subject to was sycophancy and sententiousness. That came in to a large extent after the motion picture codes. And what that did was that said to everybody involved, well, we need your complicity in a falsehood. So if the falsehood is that married couples don't sleep together, it's easy to cross-deck that in if we accept that into another falsehood, right? That for example, that later on that there were good Nazis, or for example, later on that America is racist. I mean, of course, America is racist, but it's not anymore. But we still see the result of that.
And right there, I'm going to bring you part 3 of the interview with David Mamet in hour 3 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't go anywhere. The entire interview will be posted at my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt. I'd love it if you liked and subscribed when you went over there, and if you sent this interview around. John Campbell, a longtime member of Congress and at the California State Legislature, meaning he's responsible for all that ails California. John Campbell, you're a very good investor, and I no longer own any individual stocks. I just buy ETFs. But I do like to follow on a day of earnings at the bell a big stock like NVIDIA, because right after the market closes, you can tell what the early results are by watching the after-hour trading. They're wildly, right now it's up like 2.25%, but I don't know what they are. Do you do that? I don't actually own any NVIDIA that I know of, but I like to watch when the market closes what a stock does.
I do often. I didn't today because I was listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show, which is a much better use of my time, of course. So I didn't today, so I don't know what the NVIDIA news was. But I do. Oh,
it's very good. It's now up 3% after hours trading and rising like a bullet. So it must have been a good report. Yeah. But it's a fun game to play. Are you still cautious about the market?
Yeah, I am. I don't own any of the Magnificent Seven. I'm a guy. I want dividends. I want regular earnings. I want a low PE ratio. I want value stocks. I want companies that just make money solidly and regularly over time, but not surprisingly or in big splashes. That said, I pay a lot of attention to the earnings of the Magnificent Seven because they affect sentiment. And so they affect a lot of how people, investors, are looking at the market and what they're excited about and what they're not. And if the Magnificent Seven all had a bad quarter or all went down somewhere, like NVIDIA and Amazon and Apple and so forth, I think probably takes the rest of the market with it. So I do pay attention when I'm not listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
All right. Now I want to run my one big idea past you. I heard Shelley Moore Capito in the Senate say the Senate's got to do something with the one big beautiful bill. They got to put their fingerprints on it. So my suggestion is, you remember the Greenspan Commission that came up with the recommendations for Social Security in the 80s? And you remember the BRAC, yes. Right? BRAC yes. was the base realignment. I would combine both of those, get a nonpartisan commission on entitlement reform, and have them produce its recommendations in November of next year to be voted on in December, up or down, straight vote. Would you put that into the one big beautiful bill? Because otherwise we're never going to get entitlement reform.
No, I wouldn't. And the reason I wouldn't is simple. And I actually just finished writing about this in my lookthroughthechaos.com. It's not up yet. I've sent it to my webmaster. It'll be up tomorrow. But a piece I wrote about this, which is, the president has said he's not going to touch Social Security. He said that in 2016. He said it again in 2020. He said it again in 2024, and Social Security or Medicare. And so he's not. He's just not going to do it. And so I think it's just much ado about nothing. And if you do create a commission, you start talking about this, the Democrats are going to just jump all over it. Now they have no ideas, and they're terrible with everything, but they'll just come and say, oh, Republicans want to wreck your Social Security. They're throwing grandma over the cliff. They want to make it so you don't have medical care. And it gives them something to talk about, which right now they don't have much to talk about except how they want more men and women's sports and stuff like that. So I would not give them that. And what I wrote about, and I'd encourage you, Hugh, and others to read it. The Captivating Mrs. Campbell is my editor, and she thought it was one of the best ones I've written so far when she reviewed it this morning. My point is that the big fight here is not actually the budget. It's not actually the financial stuff. And we don't want to lose the next election. We don't want to lose in 2026 or in 2028 because we tried to save the debt crisis now, because we tried to solve the debt crisis now. Hopefully we can slow that down. We'll have time to solve that. But if we go too far and we upset voters and try to solve the debt crisis now and lose the next election, and then we have or the 28 election, and the border gets open again, and universities get money and run ragged, and we have DEI and CRT and crime and all the stuff that I bundle as cultural issues. That's where, in my view, the real fight is. We've got to solve the debt problem, yes, but if solving, let me tell you one other thing. When in 2014, I had a private meeting with Paul Ryan. He wasn't speaker at that point, and a couple of other of us fiscal conservatives. And I'll never forget, Paul Ryan said to this small group, he said, in 2016, we can get a Republican president, Republican House, Republican Senate. We'll reform Medicare, we'll reform Medicaid, we'll reform Social Security. We will do it all. We will lose the next election. We'll get wiped out, but we will have saved the country. And that was his viewpoint. I don't want to get wiped out. I don't want to get wiped out. I think we can save the country without getting wiped out. And so,
do we have time on the debt? The chase for me is, do we have time to do it your way, which I would be in favor of if we have time?
And I think Scott Bessent, a very, very smart guy, can buy us some time. The markets will, if it stops getting worse, the bond vigilantes, as they call them, I think will give some time, as long as it stops getting worse. And they're trying to do that through growth. And so we'll see if they're able to do that. But I think, if there isn't time, if we have a debt crisis, then you got to do what you got to do. And we all know you cannot solve this budget crisis, the deficits and debts over time, without Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid, without the entitlements at some point. You cannot solve them once and for all without dealing with those issues. But let's not deal with them now.
What's the website, John? I want people to read this tomorrow, alongside of my piece, which argues go for it slowly, but next year. What is your website? Look through the chaos. Just tell it to me.
Just look through the chaos.com. Look through the chaos.com. It should be up tomorrow. You can subscribe. It's free. There's no ads. It's just something I do.
Will you link it on your X account at JBTC Campbell, JBT Campbell, at JBT Campbell on X? Will you link it there?
Yes. I always send out a link to it there. And it's entitled, It May Be the Economy, Stupid, but the real fight is about other things. And so it's talking about all the other things that we are fighting right now that are cultural and that are in my view, upstream from politics. And we
all right, you put the hook in. I'm reading it tomorrow.
Okay.
And I will promote it tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Be nice to Dwayne when I'm gone. I got to remind you about Relief Factor America. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I do it every hour, even though I could talk to John Campbell about that for hours, because I'm open to being argued about that. But if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, he's very emphatic. You can tell when you watch him. He's very good on TV. And I'm going to have to read that very carefully. I'm also going to take my Relief Factor with me on my trip abroad. And I would encourage you to call 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website and find the starter pack for $19.95. 3 weeks, that's less than $1 a day. Minor aches and pains should not be plaguing you every day. You ought to take Relief Factor for 3 weeks, 3 times a day, to get your levels of Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega up. And then you can say, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to keep doing that. And I've done that for 10 years. And I've taken no supplements other than Relief Factor for 20 years. So I recommend you give it a try at relieffactor.com. Relief Factor. I talked with the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. Let's pick up the interview where I left it off in the first hour. Now, I make no bones about my ignorance of crypto. I don't know anything about it. I don't know how it works. I'm too old to learn. What kind of issues do crypto present to you as a banker, Brian Moynihan?
Well, I think you have to separate the transactional side of crypto, which is the blockchain and stablecoin and things like that, away from the investment side, which is the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, et cetera. And so what you hear a lot about is if we're going to authorize with clarity that stable coins can be used and be backed by dollar for dollar reserves or treasury bills and short-term assets, then and it's legitimate to engage in the business, which is there's been a lack of clarity. It's effectively a deposit account, and the bank industry will participate in that. As to crypto's investment, we got experts who can talk about that. That's not there I'd reflect on. But I think the key, though, is if you're going to take money from somebody and hold it, and then they're going to transact and use it to go out and conduct their daily commerce, and they aren't taking any investment risk or principal risk or trying to make money off that money, they're just having you store it for them to do things. It is bank-like, so it has to be regulated, it has to be very carefully kept, or lose faith in the financial system if people lose their money because what people do with that money, et cetera. The regulation going through Congress now has a lot of safeguards in it. Regulations will be promulgated. And then I'd expect the core banking industry, so to speak, would be active in it at that point.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And crypto doesn't, but that made sense to me. Let me ask you a couple of discrete questions and then get to the big one about the economy. McKinsey, I believe they're Boston-based, maybe New York, is going to shed 10% of its staff in a 2-year profitability drive. A, what does that tell you? And B, is that something Bank of America has to look at?
Well, I think he would have put it in the context. When the management team came in 2010, our company had about 285,000 teammates working for us. Right today, we have about 213,000. So what happened in those 15 plus years? All the application of technology, simplification of business models, some divestitures, we were able to do more with less people. That is a fact. Technology allows you to do that. But meanwhile, we didn't have to do massive layoffs. We planned ahead and we're very careful about it. So what we try to do as a company, and we try to do companies constantly monitor our headcount 3 years ahead of time to make sure that we're not adding people who may become unproductive due to technology application. It is a relentless fact. But if you look at the United States from the late 60s, from 69 to 2019, the United States went from 80 million people working to 160 million people working. Well, think of the technology that came on stream in those 50 years, all the different, the PC, the phones, the smartphones, the internet itself, search engines, cellular service, all that stuff came on, and we end up employing twice as many people. So America has this way of redeploying the resources to other productive capabilities. And technology is one of those. I think what McKinsey's doing is reflecting. They may have been a little behind. I couldn't say because I don't know the facts, but we try to stay ahead of the curve and therefore are always managing the amount of teammates we have because I don't want to disrupt people's lives. We have 7% turnover, 200,000 people. That's going to be 14,000. The management team, 14,000 choices not to hire. And we won't hire if we think that long term those jobs aren't going to be secure.
That's a great perspective. Now, when I got out of college, my friends who went into banking, you might have known Joe Antonellis, or my friends who went into banking adjacent like Regina, banks merged and merged and merged again. My brother was a banker in Ohio. Is that era over, or is it going to continue to consolidate until, like accounting, we're down to 3 or 4 giants and nobody else?
Well,
Hold that answer. Hold that answer, because I don't have enough time to finish it, and I devote the second half of next hour to letting the rest of my interview with Brian Moynihan play out. It's, by the way, already posted over at YouTube if you want to go listen to it. That's got to have every Bank of America employee hooked. And there are a lot of them. And I hope they hear me in Charlotte. I do want to take a moment, though, to tell you about besthotgrill.com, because Father's Day is coming up, and my friend Rhett and Irene are busy making grills for dads and granddads. And they got small grills for grads, by the way. Big grills for dads and granddads, small grills for grads. But I want to talk about dads and granddads. They earned it. Give them the best grill in America. Besthotgrill.com. You can try it before you buy it, by the way. Or give it to yourself if you're a dad or a granddad. Solaire infrared grill, made in America, made by a company that is so dedicated to quality and absolute fine technology. The Solaire infrared grill heats to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. Does your beef, does your fish, does your chicken, but really the beef, it seals in all the flavor. Besthotgrill.com. You'll thank me. Try it before you buy it, but besthotgrill.com. And you'll just love me when you get a Solaire infrared grill. Selena Zito is columnist of The World. She's my dear friend in Pittsburgh. I talk to people in Pittsburgh via Selena, and she keeps me safe from them when I drive near Pittsburgh. Selena, I want you to stop telling the Democrats what not to do. You did it this morning again with one of the best tweets in a long time, and I want to talk about this with people. But if you're not following Selena on X, it's Zito Selena. And if you haven't ordered Butler yet, her book about she was standing feet from the president when he was shot, you need to go and order Butler. But here's what she posted this morning. By the way, how are you, Selena?
I'm swell. How are you?
I'm swell. All right, that's out of the way. Let me read this. This is not how Democrats win back voters. If anyone thinks, quote, this is the way, then they fundamentally do not understand why voters have left Democrats in droves. They also still don't understand this is one of the thousands of tiny cuts that have cost them votes. Tell people what you were writing about, because I could not believe it when I read your tweet.
So I believe it was in San Francisco, and it's in the school districts. And they put basically all of these rules in place that teach children you really don't have to do much or learn much or think to be successful. And they're putting all these guardrails up in terms of, how no one can offend or upset children. And they're taking their intellectual curiosity away. They're taking away their ability to be curious and thoughtful and debate things. And they're just making them dumb. Like they're making them dumb. And
I would never.
I feel like
I would never have seen this story except for your post. So I want to read the post that you quote tweeted. Grading for equity, this is from the Voice of San Francisco, grading for equity in the San Francisco schools eliminates homework or weekly tests from being counted in a student's final semester grades. All that matters is how the student scores on the final examination, which can be taken multiple times. Students can be late turning in an assignment or showing up to class, or no showing up at all without it affecting their academic grade. Currently, a student needs a 90 for an A and at least a 61 for a D. Under the San Leandro Unified School District's grading for equity system, touted by the San Francisco Unified School District and its consultant, a student with a score as low as 80 can attain an A, and as low as 21 can pass with a D. I thought it was a joke, but Selena, thank you for posting it, but don't tell Democrats that's their problem. I don't want them to know that parents hate this.
Oh, they're going to applaud it. Look, one of the sort of, and I put in just one of those, thousands of cuts, right? Because why Democrats have lost voters, in particular voters in the middle, right? Who aren't particularly ideological either way. They've lost them by things like the shutdowns during COVID. They lost them by things about these mandatory, stay at home, all these rules surrounding their education of their children. And we've seen the fallout of this, right? And now they're just saying it's okay to not try, and we're still going to give you an A. Like, show up and do okay, and you get an A. I mean, I feel like China's looking at us and saying, like, I can't wait to have that next generation because they're going to really
Are you
suck.
insane? It's insane. I went to my 50th high school reunion, and I still have a running joke with the valedictorian, Molly McGuire, about the fact that she didn't take ancient Greek, so she shouldn't have beat me. It's a running joke, right? Because she didn't take
Right,
ancient Greek and Latin, and it's a running joke. But the fact
right.
is, 50 years ago, you had to work hard to get good grades, and as David Mamet put in his new book, I just finished talking with Mamet. Merit is now a joke. It's actually merit is a downgrade for you. If you're meritorious, you're going to be penalized.
Mamet's book is amazing. And I have to tell you this. Years ago, I owned a theater in Pittsburgh, and the first play that I produced was Glengarry Glen Ross. And one of the things that I loved about Mamet was the way he uses dialogue to bring forth the human condition, emotion, and the experiences around him. He's brilliant at it, and his book is as brilliant as all of his plays that I've seen, which is all of them. And I'm jealous that you
You know,
interviewed him.
I talked to him for 40 minutes, and the disenlightenment is so full of praise of Trump, I was taken aback because it's dangerous for David. It can, in Hollywood, you can't be for Trump. He doesn't care. He's America's greatest
Oh,
playwright. He doesn't care. But
he is America's
have you read The
greatest playwright.
Disenlightenment? Are you ahead of that?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
good for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You ever
I
write a column about
absolutely
it?
love it. Not yet. I'm trying to find a way to possibly interview him. I would love to. Maybe you know
Oh,
someone.
I just did that for Ben Domenech. I will do it for you because David likes to talk to smart people. So he'll love
he,
that Glengarry Glen Ross. Oh,
oh,
that
yeah.
tonight,
And
tonight, Selena, I will set that up with Pam as person. Thank you, Selena. I got to run. Thank you so much. Butler is available for pre-order. Don't miss good stories. SelenaZito.com for everything she writes. Zito Selena on X. Let me tell you about Consumer Cellular. I'm not NPR, right? I have to have customers. I have to have sponsors. I have to like products and approve them. And I made the switch to Consumer Cellular because I wanted savings without sacrifice. And you can have that too. I want to make sure I get the number right. 1-800-411-4454. I'll get it into my memory bank eventually. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. No reason to pay for stuff you don't need. You can keep your number. You can keep your data. You can get a new device. But here's the deal. Don't overpay big cellular for what you don't need. If you need a lot of data, you can get 2 unlimited lines for $60 a month, which is, you can't get it beat. But if you don't need unlimited data, if you're 50 years and older, you don't. Very few people do at 50 years and older. Get one of their 10 gigs or 5 gig plans. Go investigate. Call them. All right, call them. Consumer Cellular can be reached at 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. And I want you to know that new customers only get $5 off each month for the first 5 months, but only for 5 months. I want to remind you, Angel Tree camping season is upon us. If you like me, if you like my show, then you're going to love Angel Tree, because Angel Tree benefits the children of men and women who are in jail or prison. Sometimes that child has both parents behind bars, sometimes one. No matter what their circumstance, they deserve a chance to go to camp. It costs $200. You can make it possible by going to HughHewitt.com and hitting the banner. Listen to Beth describe what it means for people.
Sometimes they need that love, not just their parents, but a community that knows what they're going through and has experienced it and say like, hey, you're going through this now, but things can get better. Be positive. Hopefully this is something that they will keep and treasure forever. Like I said, a core memory to help them want to do better, not end up in their parents' footsteps and realize that that was their dad's mistake and not theirs, but they can do better and succeed and have a great life.
I cannot imagine a more important week for a kid, especially if they're in, that's a tough circumstance. If your mom and or dad are in jail, that's a tough circumstance. And the percentage of children who do follow their parents to prison is way high. And Angel Tree breaks that cycle, meaning you can break that cycle with $200. You can call 888-206-2764. The late Senator Jim Inhofe called the show once and gave us $1,000 on the condition that he could meet the 5 kids he sent to camp, and he did. He's a great American. And you are too, for helping out. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. There are thousands of kids who will go, depending on how much we raise. Thank you in advance for your generosity. Generalissimo, I went to see Mission Impossible, the final episode, whatever it is, Final Reckoning last night.
Yes.
It's 3 hours.
Okay.
Took popcorn and milk duds to get through.
Well, that's my wife's snack of choice at the movies is popcorn and milk duds.
Is it? It's like a perfect combo. I'm wondering, are either of them on the myphdweightloss.com list?
Neither of them are on the weight loss thing. No, you typically things soaked in butter and chocolate are typically not the weight loss.
What if you move the butter around a lot?
Maybe if you move the butter around while standing or walking on a treadmill for 4 hours.
The movie is 3 hours long.
Okay, can you watch it from a treadmill?
No.
Okay,
864.
Well, that would be problematic. 644.
Wait, did I do that wrong?
I don't know. Did you?
1900. 864.
644.
1900. That's
864.
644.
1900.
I did it right. I went first. I thought I went second there for a second. 864.
644.
1900. You can actually lose weight during Mission Impossible episode 405.
Not taking Hugh's advice, yes.
Not taking my advice. Not doing what I did. But I watched it when it was on TV from 68 to 73, and it was on every night at 11 o'clock or midnight when I was a freshman in college. So I've been watching Mission Impossible for 60 years?
Yeah. The effects have gotten better.
Whoa. Yes.
Yes. The effects are pretty good.
As I said to David Mamet, it is the Cuban Missile Crisis with special effects. That's the whole movie.
Yes.
Speaking of which, David Mamet is coming up. MyPHDWeightLoss.com, a great sponsor, as is Dwayne's World. Earlier today, I interviewed David Mamet about his new book, The Disenlightenment. Here is the conclusion of that interview. The code. But anti-Semitism is all around us. Last week in Washington, D.C., where I am, 2 young Jews were murdered in cold blood by a kid from Chicago. And so I'm wondering, did the code prohibit anti-Semitism at any time, to your knowledge?
I don't know. I think that us Jews were so far below the radar that I don't actually see much anti-Semitism in the early movies. What I do see very much, especially as you get into the period after World War II, is accommodation through supposedly philo-Semitic films. For example, Exodus and Fiddler on the Roof and Gentleman's Agreement, which are kind of the equivalent of affirmative action for Jews, saying, I guess you're people too. What the real answer to the end of racism, which you see now, is it's none of your frickin' business. Leave me alone.
Yes. There's a chapter, an essay in here, where you're attending a meeting with other LA Jews, and IDF soldiers are talking to you, and you say the problem is not them, the problem is us. Do you think you will wake anybody up from the drudgery of the self-absorption of American Jewry, which voted 79% for Biden and Harris, which, as you remark frequently, is suicidal for Jews?
No, because anybody wants to get some wisdom, I suggest they read the Bible, because that's the wisdom of the human condition. It's all there. And as Dennis Prager said, he doesn't believe in the Bible because of God. He believes in God because of the Bible, because it's all in there. And if you look at the 20%, that's exactly, curiously, the same percentage of Jews that left Egypt in the Exodus. 80% stayed behind. They preferred slavery, which is the same thing, which is exactly what we see today in the 80% of the American Jews voting for their own destruction. Jews who vote Democratic are in effect queers for Palestine.
That is repeatedly showing up in here in a couple of different places. I was with breakfast with this morning downtown with a pretty significant figure in the movement, and I said, and I had your book with me. I was finishing up the outline. I said I had no idea. I've interviewed David a couple of times. I had no idea he was a constitutionalist, and I would direct people to page 58, the Constitution. It is the practical wisdom of men of the world, distilled from the combined experience of self-supporting farmers, merchants, professional men, and soldiers. Its rules exist not to coerce citizens, but to restrict government. They are, in their original form, bright, definite lines which the government must not cross. And I have taught common law for 30 years, and it's the rules of golf. Everyone can learn it, written by farmers for farmers. It's not complicated. Do you think many Americans think it is complicated wrongly, David?
I don't think many Americans think about the Constitution, and I think that the right, the conservative movement, is a return to constitutional values, whether you call them that or not. Somebody said to Rabbi Hillel, "Can you tell me the whole Torah while standing on one foot?" And he stood on one foot and said, "What's hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. Now go study." So that's what the Constitution comes down to the overwhelming majority that voted for a return to constitutional government, whether they know it or not. What they were demanding as human beings and as Americans and as workers and citizens was, if what's hateful to you, don't do to me. Leave me alone. So that's
whether
that's
they know it or not is the operative question.
Yeah.
I want to point out, you're right, that you or I could not perhaps imagine the operation or makeup of a return to constitutional democracy is understandable. That Trump and his supporters did it is an instance of extraordinary intellectual courage. I don't think I've seen that read or written anywhere, that voting for Trump required intellectual courage. Would you expand on that?
Yes. I didn't indicate primarily that it was an act of courage on the part of the people who voted for him, although it was. What I'm stating is an instance of courage on his part, because he was looking at and obviously he had forebears, not only in the first American Revolution, but also starting with the Tea Party movement and Rush and those people who came out,
yes,
those housewives in the Middle West in Chicago said, wait a second, that Trump looked around and saw something which the rest of us, and I'm getting into the final boarding process here, will say, well, it's terrible, but perhaps in some form it will last my time. And this guy looked at the whole thing and said, no, wait a second, you got it wrong. It's the Gordian knot, but it can be untied if we have courage. And so it was his courage and his determination that attracted the like-minded to him, not only his cabinet, but 80 million Americans who said, my God, I didn't realize, I know it had gotten that bad, but I didn't realize that it was possible to address these problems one by one and by opposing, or as Shakespeare says, or take arms against the sea of trouble, and by opposing, end them. So it's extraordinary intellectual courage, on moral courage in this guy's part. And I remember I heard that Melania, before they came down when he first said he was thinking of running for president, she said, please, please don't do it, Donald. He said, why not? And she said, because if you do it, you'll win. So these are extraordinary people, and I feel so fortunate to have them in position of leadership, not of my life, but of the government.
One observation you made, I don't have a particular page cite, is that the debate revealed Biden, in his essence, incognate, without will, energy, perhaps even the capacity to be president, and that the assassination attempt on Trump revealed Trump at his essence, fight, 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 courageous and willing to move forward. I think that's going to be picked up by Team Trump and used. Have you lost friends, by the way, because you've said nice things about Trump?
Well, I thought they were friends. You know, I turned a lot of friends into acquaintances. Thank you. I turned a lot of friends into acquaintances and a lot of acquaintances into antagonists and enemies. But, you know, what the hell?
Did you pick up any along the way? Any new friends who are actually artists?
Yes, a few friends who are actually artists, and a lot of friends who aren't artists but are actual human beings. And these are the people that I want to be with. You know, it's like people said, someone in one of Edith Wharton's essays, she said, somebody said that the young woman said she wanted to break into society, and Edith said, why? Right? So why? Yeah, why? There's nobody there. So who do you want for your friends? People have gone around for years saying, well, this may not be politically correct, but, which was the opening wedge in the wokeism, right? Or I hope I don't offend it. You know, my friends now, my colleagues and my associates and and the co-religionaries who devoted to conservative values, which are Judeo-Christian values, are people that are standing with me, and I'd stand with them. I mean,
the one person you don't mention in the book at all that I regret, and I want your thoughts on him, Mitch McConnell elected Donald Trump, though neither want to admit it, because Mitch McConnell held open the vacancy that Justice Scalia's death created, and that issue propelled Trump over the top in 2016. Now they've fallen out, and it's irreconcilable. But one could not be the other without one having been the other. It's really they're linked forever.
Well, here's something I was reading in the commentary, a Chabad commentary on the Torah. He's talking, and the guy says, talking about God, right? And he says the guy's late for work and he's looking for a parking space, and it's his first day at work. And if he's late on his first day, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. He can't find a parking space, God, he says, God, I've never asked you for anything before. I need a parking space. Just as he says that, the guy in front of him pulls out and there's a parking space right in front of the office. He says, thanks, God, don't forget about it. I found one.
That is McConnell and Trump. Well said. There are various unfortunate iterations of anti-Semitism in here. Before we take our break, I just want to bring up one. Jonathan Glazer at the Academy Awards was the perfect example of when you've run out of sexy diseases to champion, crack open the toolkit and take out the all-purpose tool, which is anti-Semitism. Getting worse or getting better?
Oh, it's getting much worse. It's getting much, much worse. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
pause right there, America. The entire interview is posted over at my YouTube channel, and it's in the order that I recorded it, not the order that I played it today. I would recommend it to you. Send it to your friends. Mamet is a genius, kind of fun talking to a normal genius, and I can't wait to watch Henry Johnson, the movie. Abe Greenwald is the executive editor of Commentary, is one of the regulars on the Commentary podcast. Abe, this morning I was listening, and David Barry's new book came up. I heard everybody rave about it, but it reminded me, I can't talk to comedians. I have no ability to talk to funny people, and I froze when I was introduced to him, but I will read the book anyway. I like your recommends a lot. I just finished talking to David Mamet for 45 minutes. He is of the opinion that anti-Semitism is skyrocketing and getting much, much worse. Do you agree with him?
I think there's no question. I think it's an objective fact, yes.
How much worse can it get in the United States?
Well, that really is the question of the hour. In some way, when we had the shootings last week of the two young employees of the Israeli embassy in Washington, it seemed, of course, horrific and shocking, but also inevitable. Hasn't everything that has happened in terms of pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist activism in this country since the very moment that Hamas launched its war of extermination on Israel on October 7th, 2023, hasn't everything been geared toward targeted violence against Jews? And you have this in combination with a kind of culture of worship on the left of violent figures, talking about the guy who shot the United Healthcare CEO. And now there is also support, particularly from the American socialists, hoping to free the shooter of those two young Israeli embassy staffers last week. So the lionization of this kind of violence and of the perpetrators of it lays the ground for copycat killings. And we should say clearly the line has been crossed from terror supporters, which is what these pro-Hamas activists have always been, even though the legacy media would describe them as pro-Palestinian activists, but they were always nakedly, unapologetically pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist activists. The line has been crossed from terror supporters to terrorists. And that's one of those barn door situations, I fear.
Now, Abe, I want to make sure my list is complete. The leftist who tried to kill every Republican congressman, I don't know that he was anti-Semitic, but he was a violent leftist. The would-be assassin of Kavanaugh, violent leftist. The would-be assassins of Trump, violent leftist. I don't want to be guilty of a failure of imagination, though, by stringing together 5 events, 7 events of violence from the left and not imagining how bad anti-Semitism can get in the United States. I don't want to be one of the silent Germans. How bad do you think it can get?
I think it can get extraordinarily bad. I think, look, we see, if you look back on 2015 in Paris, there was a kind of jihadist siege in several stages of the city, and that has happened in European cities to varying degrees at different points. I don't think we're quite there because, in part, and this is something that is sort of novel about what's happening in the U.S. The people or persons who are killing in the name of a free Palestine, while chanting Islamist slogans in the US, are not necessarily Islamists themselves, which is unlike what we've seen in Europe. They are leftists who have been instrumentalized by this Islamist cause and worked it into their own leftist theology, which is not unlike what we saw in the 1960s among the leftists who worshipped Marxist paramilitary groups in, say, Latin America.
Or Baader-Meinhof and the Red Brigades. Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. The left always comes around to the arms of the country's worst enemies. It doesn't matter if they're Stalinists. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the Castros. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Che Guevara. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about jihadists. They will find their way into the arms of America's worst enemies, all on their own. And that is what's happening. And it's quite a moment. We are not approaching the moment. We are dead in the moment, and I think that needs to be recognized.
Well, you don't need recommendations from me, Abe, but if you read David Mamet's new book, The Disenlightenment, he is with you. And my you don't need any addition. If you do a symposium on how bad it could get in America, I'd read every page because I don't want to be guilty of a failure of imagination. I just sometimes think I have too much confidence in our political system, that we would reject the overt appeals to anti-Semitism, but we haven't yet conclusively. Mamet and I talked today when I was interviewing about the book. He thinks they've been beaten once, but he quoted Victor Davis. They have to be beaten repeatedly at the polls. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think that plays a big role in it. I also happen to think, and I think this is an underappreciated point, that Israel finishing the job in Gaza will do a lot to send American and Western Jew haters back into their hidey holes. Because don't forget, the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist crowd came out chanting jihadist slogans, not when Israel responded to the slaughter of October 7th, but when that happened, when Hamas massacred Jews and Israelis on October 7th, because for them, this was about exploiting a moment of weakness. And when Israel looks strong and takes the upper hand and changes the state of play to one in which, oh, the Jews aren't weak. Maybe this window of opportunity is closing for us. They go back and hide. So I have a firm conviction that Israeli victory will do a great deal to push back the violent anti-Semitism in the U.S. and around the West.
I hope you're right, because I think that victory is coming. Abe Greenwald, follow him on X at Abe Greenwald. Listen to him on Commentary Podcast 5 days a week. Thank you, Abe. Want to remind all of you, Angel Tree is raising money right now for children who need to go to camp this summer, and it costs $200 to send the child of a prisoner to camp. You're making it happen. You do it every year. Thank you. The banner is at hughhewitt.com. The phone number is 888-206-2764. That is 888-206-2764. I thank you in advance for your generosity. Sarah C. Bedford is chief political reporter over at Washington Examiner. Sarah, we're pushing for time today, but I need your update on the one big beautiful bill in the Senate. How much disambiguation are they going to do on that bill? Are they going to chop it up or leave it alone?
You know, I think, unfortunately for Micah Johnson, who worked so hard to get this over the finish line in the House, there is going to be some serious wrangling in the Senate over what goes in this bill. You already have different Republican members who each wield more power individually just because of the nature of the Senate, saying they want to see changes. You have Senator Josh Hawley saying he's not satisfied with the way Medicaid was tinkered with in the House. You have Senator Ron Johnson, who says he wants to see spending levels return to the pre-COVID era. Mike Lee, for example, saying he wants to see an anti-regulatory provision strengthened. So all of these Republican senators are going to have demands, and I think it's going to be still a difficult road ahead for this bill.
Which is the hardest one to satisfy? Because Mike Lee's demand can be made consistent. I'm not sure what Hawley's demand, whether or not it can be accommodated, but I don't think you can cut the deficit much more, can you?
Yeah, I think you're right that Senator Ron Johnson's demand that spending return to pre-COVID levels is difficult. And it's funny because that sounds like a super common sense idea to most people outside of Washington, right? Why should the federal government be spending more than they were before the pandemic and so much more? But I think within Washington, the Republicans in the House cut everything that they're able to cut with the size of their current majority, the makeup of their current majority. And so to deepen those cuts so significantly would be really difficult in the Senate, and then even more so, I think, in the House.
So, Sarah, last question. Which ones will they just give up trying to persuade? Who's the Thomas Massey of the Senate?
That would be Rand Paul, who I think is set to vote no pretty much on anything if it doesn't make dramatic cuts. But I think Hawley you're starting to see him soften on his demands that Medicaid remained untouched. So perhaps Hawley could be the first of that bunch to fold.
Sarah, we will check back at greater length next week. Sarah C. Bedford on X. Thank you, Sarah. I got to check the market. AmericanFederal.com is our sponsor. If you're going to buy or sell gold today, you're going to do so with the price at the close of the market at $3,294. So it's down today, as is the whole market. The Dow is down 0.58, the S&P down 0.56, the NASDAQ down 0.5%. But AmericanFederal.com will deal with you on a regular basis, not based upon daily ups and downs in the price of gold. Nick Grovich and his team, 888, I'm getting that wrong, 1-800, too many phone numbers for me, American Federal, 800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Nick and his team have been doing this for more than 40 years, coming in on 43. They buy gold from you. They sell gold to you. They do it transparently, honestly, and quickly. I bought my gold from them in January. I will do so again next year. That's my plan. I do it in Januaries. And I don't care what the price is because it just goes into the safety deposit box and hopefully I don't have to sell it. Runaway money, it's part of a diversified portfolio. And I'm telling you right now, you ought to have some precious metals. Just like you ought to have some dirt, some stocks, some bonds, some cash. Gold is part of a diversified portfolio. And to do it, you want to do it with Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. That is 800-221-7694. Please also don't forget ReliefFactor.com. I'm in their studio. I'm getting ready for vacation. I'm taking it with me. Why? Because I want to enjoy hiking. I want to enjoy biking. I want to enjoy walking and doing whatever the fetching Mrs. Hewitt wants to do. That means Relief Factor every day in order to get rid of the minor aches and pains that come with travel, long flights, steep hills. Relief Factor works. Call them at 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or simply go and find the Starter Pack 1995 at their website, ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I'm losing my voice. I think it's because of the weather today, but I will tell you, it's raining and cold in D.C., but I will tell you I'm not losing my love of Relief Factor. I take it everywhere. I take it all the time, and the reason is simple. It works, it works, it works. And so do give it a try. Last thing I want to do, AndrewandTodd.com. They are the best when it comes to financing the purchase of a new home. 888-1172. I had American Federal and Sierra Pacific mixed up. Sierra Pacific lends you money if you're moving, if you're buying a home, if you have to take out a second because you want to expand your home, and a lot of people are doing that. If you need a home equity line of credit in order to tap into the money you've built up in your house, that's AndrewandTodd.com. All over the country, 888-1172. They are the bank. If you're a veteran, put nothing down. If you're a first-time home buyer, get a FHA loan. And if you need a reverse mortgage, AndrewandTodd.com. 888-1172. I've known Andrew for 25 years. You can trust him. I've known Todd half as long. 888-1172. Earlier today, I talked to Brian Moynihan, CEO of Bank of America. Here's part 3 of that interview.
Well, using accounting or pharmacies or diners, all this stuff. You've seen these consolidations in these at large platforms. Coke, Pepsi, they bought a bunch of companies along the way, but there's always a role for different types of marketing strategies and go into market strategies. So smaller banks and big banks. And so in my hometown where I grew up in Marietta, People's Bank, I think, is the largest bank in that part of Ohio. And the fellow used to run that, became a pen pal of mine because it was ironic. He came from Brooklyn, New York and ran that bank. And I came from Marietta, Ohio and ran Bank of America. So we used to correspond. But you always see roles for banks of all different stripes. Will there be continued consolidation? There will be. But I think that is sort of, there's still 4,000 plus banks. It doesn't mean there'll be 4. It means there might be less than we have today. But that consolidation really is because the business model, the effectiveness. So that bank in Marietta, People's Bank, has bought a bunch of banks to become a bigger competitor to us and other people. But it allows them to get scale and efficiency and effectiveness. Now, at Bank of America, we focus on our local markets. We have 97 markets with 97 market presidents who can deliver the entirety of our company. We look at what we do in every one of those markets, from small business lending, the branches we have, the financial advisors in Merrill, the private bankers, the commercial bankers. So we think of ourselves as a big company, but delivered one client at a time locally. And getting that right is actually, I think, one of the competitive advantages we have as a company.
Penultimate question before I go to the state of the economy. 10,000 people turn 65 every day in America. So the boomers are retiring. Do you think they're ready for retirement from your perspective of you're not there yet, I'm not there yet, but we're close. You know, we're knocking on retirement's door in a decade or so. What do you think about the boomers? Do they have any idea what it's going to be like, and is banking ready to help them?
Well, so a couple things. Yes, we're ready to help them. So we have financial planning tools that we've been working with clients for many years. And whether you want to do it yourself through our Merrill Edge platform, or whether you want to have financial advisors through our FSAs or Merrill FAs or private bankers, depending on what your needs are. But one of the goals we've had is to bring the ability to do as sophisticated as financial planning as we can into techniques that can be used by all our teammates to deliver to their clients, or the clients do it themselves. So people have to get ready for retirement. They have to save. If you're 65 or 70 today and you retire, you know, the die is cast, frankly. So the real question is to preserve people's capability to do what they want to do with their life. It's their life. Our job is to help them live their financial life. We got to get to them at 30 and say, hey, a little bit saved now does a lot over time, at 35, 40, and help them think through the use of their money and what they want to save for. So our Life Goals program, and our life plans, which is not automated, has tens of thousands, tens of millions of people, 10 million people, I think, have done it now. They're basically loading up those plans based on their goals. And what you're trying to get with younger people is saying kids to college, second home, retirement, whatever goals it is to invest against that. So the people retiring today have lived through a period of great economic prosperity in America and great growth in wages and stuff like that. But if they're struggling, it's going to be because earlier on they probably didn't save like they should have. That's where we match in the 401k, at the full dollar for dollar from day one for people, and other employers do. We're trying to help people save. But yes, we have the advice tools. They're automated. They're personally delivered. They're there that you can access them. But I think the key about retirement is to actually get into it earlier and more often, so that it becomes less of an issue later on in life.
For part two of that question, from your perspective, top of one of the country's great banks, is America financially literate? 50%, 30%, 10%? I mean, I personally don't think we teach kids how to deal with money early enough, but what do you think? You run the bank.
Well, we have great programs. So we went with Sal Khan, and we built tools in education. Sal Khan was Khan Academy, and your kids may have used it to learn about physics in high school, or calculus, or other geometry, or whatever they learned about. So we helped them build Better Money Habits. And Better Money Habits is one of the most widely used programs to educate colleagues. We also work with high schools and middle schools around the country. Those teammates we have in all those markets volunteer their time to go in and help them. But I think it's incumbent upon our company and our companies in our industry to help people learn how to manage their financial affairs better and better and better over time. The interesting part of that is also build products that allow to sort of help that happen automatically. So we built a no overdraft checking account, which can't be overdrafted. And because we did that, that obviously puts guardrails on it. And about 40%, if I remember right, of our accounts today are open where people can't overdraft. And people say, well, overdrafts, and they get charged, and that puts them, the fees plus the disruption, et cetera. Well, this account can't be overdrafted, 40% of the people open. That is a self-enforcing guardrail. So we do it with product design. We do it with education. But I think we need to keep educating, because it's I took home economics at Marietta High School, and they taught you how to balance your checkbook and how to put all the entries in. I shouldn't say, because I don't know, but my guess is that's not taught with the same intensity it might have been 50 years ago.
No, it's not. Let me then get to the meat of this. The big, beautiful bill, Brian Moynihan. Elon Musk has joined the critics of the big, beautiful bill. I like the big, beautiful bill because I know how hard it is to get anything out of the Republican Congress, and we can't have a tax hike on the order that would occur if we don't get any beautiful bill or any bill at all. What do you think of the one big, beautiful bill and Musk's criticism of its deficit qualities?
So I think you have to sort really part of your question, Hugh, which is, in the end of the day, the United States is what is the place to invest because of a series of things: the talent, the capabilities, the ability to succeed and fail, the ability to raise capital. and the tax rate, which was uncompetitive in the 17 Act, they got it to be competitive. And people were moving activities outside the United States because the tax rates were so differentially high in the United States. We have to preserve that to keep corporate world, not only corporate America, continuing to invest in the United States. So that was critical. The second question, and Moody's just downgraded the U.S., is this issue of getting the budget closer to imbalance. So its growth rate of outstanding debt to the economy size starts to tail off and not grow as fast. And I think that I just read the comments in the press, but that is a concern that a lot of us have had, is we've got to get our eyes and stomach aligned over time. It has not as much to do with this particular bill as it has to do how we're going to operate year after year after year. And this bill preserves the taxes and does some spending on some items. But the real question is, we can't run a $1.8 trillion operating deficit year after year after year. We have to start paring away. We don't have to bring it to zero. We just have to start making it a little bit less. If the growth comes out of this bill and helps dilute down the size of the debt relative to the economy, then that's a successful way to do it. But we've got to make sure we get that growth, or else then have to course correct on the expense side. And I think that's it.
We'll be back for the conclusion of the interview with Brian Moynihan, which is over at my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube. I would love it if you'd like to subscribe to that. Job Creators Network is one of our great sponsors. And I'm talking about the tax bill with the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. I want to remind you, taxcutsnow.com is where you go to participate in the effort to show the United States Senate that there is massive resolve to get the tax cuts made permanent. Taxcutsnow.com. From our friends at Job Creators Network, taxcutsnow.com. Here's the conclusion of my interview with CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan.
Tug of war, the taffy pull that's going on in Congress and everywhere among economists and among the world in the debt markets every day. Is the United States going to stay the gold standard across the world for fiscal responsibility? And how do we make sure it stays on that course? That is not necessarily the bill. It's more about what goes on around it.
That's a very useful line. We have to align our eyes with our stomach. I haven't heard that before. Now, when we talked about young people, we talked about 30 to 40-year planning. Can we attack the deficit with 30 to 40-year reforms on the entitlements, which is what I think, raise the retirement age a month a year for the next 40 years? That would raise it to 69 over 40 years. I don't think anyone would be shocked by that. Is that kind of a change sufficient to the day, Brian Moynihan?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things, Hugh. And I think if you remember the Bowles-Hallowell Commission, I think it was called. I remember that was in the bipartisan people from each side. There was a series of ideas like that, and various congressmen and congresswomen and senators. The idea is you're going to have to trim entitlements a bit, but with time, to your point, you can trim them a little bit, and it never really disrupts somebody. And the warning and the lesson for the younger people is, Social Security as a percentage you can make it more needs attached, so that you, with all the earnings you get from all the work you do, may not get as much as someone else. You can do things like that, and with a little bit over time, you can change it. And then I think the government has to get more efficient and spend less as a percentage of what they're doing. And in the Clinton years, they reduced the federal headcount by 300,000 or more, and you can do that. That's good because it just keeps growing. Even though we've applied tremendous technology, just think of us. We've gone from 300,000 people to 200,000 people. Why hasn't the government gone down at the same rate? It's just you can operate more efficiently. So they got to do that on the expenditure side. And then I think, frankly, with some of the the medical costs for insured government insured populations, both older and lesser high earners, there's a value to all this technology that we're developing through all this research to tie it back to some of this stuff, this AI work, distributed ability to provide higher and higher care. The GLPs, they may be costly now, but they could really change the amount of diabetes and heart issues in the country. There are ways that we can actually, if we keep investing, I think also find ways that we can reduce the amount of healthcare expenditure relative to GDP. And since the government...
Very optimistic from Brian Moynihan. The last 30 seconds of the interview is at the YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube. Send it around. It's very optimistic. In the meantime, don't forget taxcutsnow.com. We need you to echo the message that Mr. Moynihan gave, that we need this bill right now for growth. Taxcutsnow.com from the Job Creators Network, our sponsor.